Hello, my darlings. Today we're going to go over some important words in terms of poetry, of Shakespeare, of sonnets in general. So the first I'm going to remind you is iambic. And iambic, remember, is a pattern of stressed, of unstressed, stressed. And unstressed means it's a syllable that you kind of slide over, and stress means you over enunciate it. So an example of this would be above. You barely say the but you put a lot of emphasis on the above part, so above. The second word to remember is pentameter. It looks like pentameter, but it's pentameter, and that's when a pattern is repeated 5 times. And again, there's all different types of patterns. You can have stressed, unstressed. You can have stressed, unstressed, unstressed. But the pattern we care about is iambic, and the amount of times it's repeated that we care about is pentameter. So it's going to end up looking like this. All right. So this is what it looks like 5 times. Notice that when a sentence is in iambic pentameter, it's always going to start out with unstressed, it's always going to end with stressed, and it's always going to have 10 syllables. So an example of what a sentence like that would look like in Shakespeare would be this one. Number 2 is loathsome in his own deliciousness. Is loathsome in his own deliciousness. So unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. It's repeated 5 times, which means it's in iambic pentameter. So when we talk about iambic pentameter, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. We're going to return to this concept in a second, but for now, we're going to review some other words. So the next word we're going to go over is rhyme scheme. And rhyme scheme sounds like it's going to be intimidating, but it's actually pretty easy. It's just the pattern of rhyme. And so sometimes every other line rhymes, and that's going to look like A, B, A, B, A, B. And that's how we use letters to mark the rhyme. So this might be fast, and this might be race, and this might be cast, and this might be face. Fast and race don't rhyme, so fast is marked with A, race is marked with B, cast is marked with A, face is marked with B, because face rhymes with race, cast rhymes with fast. And this can take all different forms. This can be A, B, B. This can be A, B, C, C. So you can have any sort of pattern. Let's take a look at Mary Had a Little Lamb real quick. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. The first line always starts with A, and then you look at the next one, snow. Lamb and snow don't rhyme, so that gets a B. Then you look at the next one, went. It doesn't rhyme with lamb, and it doesn't rhyme with snow, so it gets a new letter, C. And then we look at go. It doesn't rhyme with lamb, but it does rhyme with snow, so it gets marked with a B. Here's another example. Hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock. The clock struck 1, down he run, hickory dickory dock. Dock always starts with A. We always start the first line with A. Clock and dock rhyme, so that also gets an A. 1 does not rhyme with dock and clock, so it gets a B. Run does not rhyme with dock and clock, but it does rhyme with 1, and so it gets a B. And then dock rhymes with dock and clock, so it gets an A. So that's rhyme scheme. The next thing we're going to go over is rhymed couplet. And a rhymed couplet is when two lines in a row rhyme. So that would be like the AABB format. So an example is number 5 on this paper. My only love sprung from my only hate, too early seen unknown and known too late. Here we have hate and late. They rhyme and they're right next to each other. So that's a rhymed couplet. They're a couple. They belong together. Okay, so let's start putting all of it together about why we care. Before we do that, one last thing I want to go over are quatrains. Now remember, in a poem we have stanzas. It's often written like this. The first poetry paragraph is called a stanza. When it has 4 lines, it's called a quatrain. So once again, a quatrain is a stanza, a poetry paragraph, that is 4 lines long. When we put all of this together, it creates a certain type of poem called a sonnet. Before we get into the history of sonnets, let's do a real quick summary of what a sonnet is. First of all, it's a total of 14 lines. Those lines are made up of 3 quatrains, so 3 4-line stanzas, and a rhymed couplet at the end. So 3 times 4 is 12, and a rhymed couplet is 14 lines. The sonnet is also in AB format, specifically the quatrains. Now remember, the rhymed couplet is at the end, but every other line is going to be every other line is going to be AB. It is written in iambic pentameter. And thus, each line has 10 syllables. So, as a visual person, I like to see what we're talking about. So, what it would look like is something like this. This is a quatrain, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. This is a quatrain, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the third quatrain, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the rhymed couplet at the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Second, every line is in iambic pentameter, so it's all going to have 10 syllables of unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed. Okay. So here is a brief, really brief history of sonnets and really why we care about them. In the dawning of the Renaissance, there was a guy named Petrarch, and Petrarch fell in love with the beautiful Laura. He loved her so much that he started writing poetry about how much he loves her and he just wishes she would love him back. It didn't work. She was already married. Whether or not she succumbed to his poetry, I'm not sure. But this type of poem, I love you, why don't you love me back, using a very structured pattern, became popular in Italy, then it became popular in France, and then it became popular in England, specifically during Queen Elizabeth's time. And in Queen Elizabeth's time, remember, we're using English now instead of like Italian or France. This is the form it took. So an Italian sonnet is going to be different from a Shakespearean in English. This is Shakespearean. Okay, so these become popular around Shakespeare's time, and everybody was writing them. People were only cool if you were writing sonnets. That's how you proved you were smart. But that was also how you would try to get a woman to fall in love with you. You would write her poetry. And so sonnets were all over the place among the rich, educated people. And Shakespeare, in addition to all of the people paying 1 penny to come to see his plays, he wanted the rich people to like his plays too, because they're going to pay more, but also they might invite him to their house, and then they could get a private performance for a lot more money. And so, to get them interested in his plays, he put sonnets into them. But he doesn't just stick them in there and be like, hey, you like that sonnet? He does some really interesting things with them. So we're going to talk in another video about the interesting things he does with his sonnets. But for now, this is the language of the sonnet. These are the rules we're looking for. 14 line, 3 quatrains with an AB rhyme scheme, a rhymed couplet at the end, and written in iambic pentameter.